الإسرائيلية أهلا بكم.
Welcome to Israel Watch. Several topics have garnered significant attention in the Hebrew media, including the ongoing situation in Syria, which remains a focal point for commentary and analysis. There are many questions about the future and how to address the repercussions of this event, especially with the continued occupation of more Syrian territories by Israeli forces. Additionally, the issue of ultra-Orthodox conscription and the Israeli calls for the annexation of the West Bank have also captured the interest of commentators. Today we will discuss these topics with our guest, Mr. Saleh Abu Azza, who closely follows Israeli affairs. We warmly welcome you, Mr. Abu Azza. Let's dive into the numerous questions being raised in the Hebrew media regarding the situation in Syria. What will the circumstances look like there, especially with doubts surrounding the possibility of stability? One Israeli analyst has highlighted the comments made by Ahmad al-Shar regarding the Israeli occupation of Syrian territories.
הבעייתיות של התמונה הזאת היא שאנחנו לא מדברים על ארגון אחד, אנחנו לא מדברים על שחקן אחד או מנהיג אחד, יש בליל של מורדים עם אג'נדות שונות, עם סדר יום אחר, אנחנו שומעים גם קולות של מורדים שאומרים התחנה הבאה היא אל-אקצא בירושלים, או אנחנו באים לעזור לפלסטינים בעזה, וזו הנקודה צריכה להדאיג גם אותנו מהבחינה הזאת.
והמסרים שאתה שומע שאומר ג'וליאני לעבר ישראל, אלה מסרים שאומרים תנו לנו שקט ונהיה איתכם בשקט, או יש משהו מעבר לזה, אולי לכונן יחסים?
הוא מצהיר שלמעשה העם הסורי עייף, הוא אחרי שנים של מאבקים וסכסוכים פנימיים, ולכן אין לו רצון לפתוח בסכסוכים חדשים. אבל צריך לשים לב לדקויות של ההתבטאויות של אל-ג'ולאני, כי באותו הרעיון הוא גם אומר, ישראל איבדה את הטיעונים שלה לבוא ולתקוף את סוריה. זאת אומרת, הפצצתם לנו תשתיות צבאיות, הפצצתם מתקנים אסטרטגיים, אנחנו כבר לא עם איראן, זה בעצם מה שעשיתם, הכלנו את האירוע, אין לכם עוד צורך, אין לכם עוד אינטרס או טיעון לבוא ולתקוף את סוריה, יש ציפייה וקריאה לישראל לסגת. מה גם שאני מזכיר, המשלחת הסורית לאום הגישה כבר ביום שישי האחרון תלונה למועצת הביטחון, גם כמובן למזכ"ל האום, שלכפות על ישראל באמצעים מיידיים ותקיפים, לסגת מהשטחים שהיא תפסה באזור החיץ.
Well, Mr. Abu Azza, there are Israeli concerns regarding the future situation in Syria, as the outcome there could impact Israel's strategic interests, as noted by the Zionist analysts we saw.
نعم يعني هنالك عدم يقين لدى الإسرائيليين.
There's a sense of uncertainty among the Israelis regarding how to engage with the new regime in Damascus. They recognize that there are numerous Syrian opposition groups or armed factions, and even if they establish connections with certain individuals or leaders within these groups, they will struggle to build relationships with members who are Syrian and likely view Israel as an enemy. Additionally, it is impossible to control all the factions, which leaves uncertainty about how much influence Abu Muhammad al-Jolani can exert over these groups. While they tend to lean towards al-Jolani, acknowledging his statements despite his past radicalism, they note that he initially speaks against engaging in wars with external entities, then expresses a lack of desire for conflict with Israel, and eventually asserts that no resistance actions will be permitted from Syrian territory towards Israel. He gives reassurance to Israel.
هو يذهب بأقصى درجات الطمأنة لإسرائيل.
We also saw in the video that the Israeli analyst mentioned Ahmad al-Shar, known as al-Jolani, and his stance on the Israeli occupation of Syrian territories. Do you believe these positions contribute to the ongoing nature of this occupation? As you pointed out, he has said that they don't want any more wars.
نعم يعني هو هنالك مسارين في الحديث الإسرائيلي.
There are currently two main narratives in Israeli discussions regarding the ground invasion and occupation. They talk about the temporary nature of this occupation while also making statements that suggest a belief in its performance, indicating a more organized stance rather than conflicting statements. The reactions from Syria, the international community, and the Syrian people, along with their ability to mount a genuine resistance against this occupation, will influence whether it remains temporary or becomes permanent. As of now, I believe that Abu Muhammad al-Jolani's positions significantly contribute to the idea of this occupation being a lasting one.
بشكل كبير أن يكون هذا الاحتلال دائما.
What direction can we take when considering Israel's stance on its relationship with the new regime in Syria? Will the occupation of Syrian territories somehow assist the Israelis in establishing the positive relationship they desire with this regime in Syria?
الآن العودة إلى ذات المشاريع التي يؤمن بها الإسرائيليون.
It's time to return to the projects that the Israelis believe in. The ongoing occupations and expansions cannot be separated from this, regardless of whether this new system responds positively or if there's some anger towards Israeli actions. The Israelis are determined to achieve several objectives. Firstly, the Israelis never dismiss the idea of reaching the Euphrates from their minds. They also do not disregard the concept of the David Corridor. This corridor could become a reality if genuine conditions arise, particularly if there is a deep Turkish-Kurdish conflict that exhausts both sides. Therefore, part of diminishing Syrian military capabilities is linked to ensuring that all forces within Syria are equal in terms of weaponry, allowing this conflict to persist for as long as possible. This continuation is something Israel is interested in, by the way, as it benefits from the chaos and division occurring in Syria. Israel wishes for the division to continue to establish the corridor that starts from the Golan Heights, Qunaytara, Daraa, and Suwaida, extending to areas controlled by the Syrian Democratic Forces and the Kurds. If it can achieve this, the ongoing conflict will undoubtedly serve its interests.
هذا الاقتتال يخدم بلا شك.
One of the questions raised by the Hebrew media regarding the Syrian situation is about the usefulness of occupying the buffer zone in the occupied Golan Heights and whether there is a real need for it. It's important to note that at present there is no threat to Israeli security coming from Syria.
השאלה מה אנחנו מתכוונים לעשות. הצעדים של לייצר בזריזות איזשהו אזור חיץ, כולל הפעולה באזור החרמון, כדי לייצר איזה מצב המתנה סביר בסוריה, הם בסדר, כל עוד הם זמניים לחלוטין. כי אני אגיד לך מה יקרה. כרגע אין למיטב ידיעתי באזור הגבול הסורי כוחות שהם עוינים באופן פעיל לישראל. עכשיו, ברגע שאנחנו נשב שם, שאנחנו נהיה נוכחים שם, באזורים, בכפרים, ברגע שטביעת רגלנו תהיה שם, יקרה מה שקורה תמיד, וזה שכל מי שמשהו לא מוצא חן בעיניו, יפנה את זה כלפי הכוחות הישראלים שנמצאים שם, ואנחנו לא נהיה עם ההגנה של להיות מעבר לגדר, להיות ערוכים חזק, ולמנוע הגעה של מישהו לגדר, אלא נצטרך להגן על עצמנו בתוך סוריה. בהיבט של החרמון יש לזה גם היבט של החורף המתקרב, יש לנו לצערנו גם ניסיון קשה עם הדבר הזה. זאת אומרת, כל השאלה, כמו בכל המלחמה הזאת, זה האם יש מחשבה מדינית מאחורי הפעולה הצבאית, עד עכשיו, בהרבה מאוד מהמקומות לא הייתה, ואם אנחנו מתכוונים לייצר באופן קבוע איזושהי חגורת חיץ בתוך סוריה, אני רוצה להגיד, א', אני בספק גדול אם זה נחוץ, ואני בספק עוד יותר גדול אם זה מועיל.
What is Netanyahu's goal in occupying this buffer zone? And what is the benefit of that, as questioned by the Israeli commentator?
نعم هنالك 4 منطلقات ينطلق منها بشكل عام.
There are generally 4 main points to consider. First, they are protective measures. There's a focus on safeguarding the Golan Heights and the northern region as much as possible. However, there's also a proactive aspect to consider. When complete control is established over the Golan Heights, it allows for effective monitoring of the entire area, including radar coverage over Lebanon and parts of Syria. Currently, a significant topic of discussion is the Jordanian border with occupied Palestine. The issue has been raised frequently lately, and while it has been a concern in the past, it has resurfaced with renewed urgency regarding the Islamic Revolution Guard's involvement in sending weapons and supporting Palestinian resistance in the West Bank. Hezbollah is also implicated in these discussions. There are talks about billions being allocated to construct a barrier between Jordanian territory and the occupied Palestinian lands. This control enhances the radar's ability to monitor the Jordanian border more effectively, linking the Beqa Valley with the southern region and extending to Damascus. The third point relates to settlement activities. This ties back to the previous question we asked. Will Netanyahu's actions reflect what the settlement government is thinking? Is there a conflict with the new system? I believe several issues have emerged in the Israeli media. There's always been a question raised. Is what is happening in Israel an exploitation of the chaos in Syria? Or is it a prearranged plan with international parties, possibly including Syrian factions and the new boundaries of Israeli influence? Based on statements made by officials and various signals in the Hebrew media, it seems that that the situation is more complex than just taking advantage of the Syrian turmoil. It appears there may be arrangements in place with Syrian groups, the United States, and even Turkey to control the situation. The fourth point relates to the desired corridor. However, this corridor is believed to be outside of existing arrangements. This suggests that Israel's aggressive nature, its tendency for constant expansion, and its disregard for agreements, even with allies like Turkey and the United States, might lead to an even greater push for expansion beyond mere agreements and influence.
فكرة الاتفاق والنفوذ إلى التمدد أكبر وأكبر.
ولننتقل من سوريا إلى الأردن.
Now shifting from Syria to Jordan, Israeli media has reported on a secret visit by the head of the Shin Bet and the head of the military intelligence to Jordan. This visit aimed to coordinate efforts regarding border security and to provide security assistance to Jordan, according to an Israeli military analyst.
العسكريين الإسرائيليين.
זה ירדן, צריך לשים לב, גם ראש השב"כ וגם ראש אגף המודיעין ביקרו ביום שישי האחרון בממלכה שם והיו בסדרת פגישות עם המקבילים הביטחוניים שלהם כדי לבחון סיוע אפשרי לגורמי הביטחון שם. החשש הוא שגם שם תהיה התפרצות, ואנחנו יודעים שהגבול הארוך שמתחיל בערבה ומסתיים במשולש הגבולות הוא פרוץ מאוד, ובישראל מוטרדים מאוד מאפשרות כזו. גם על תוכן הפגישות שם הוטל איפול כבד בשל הרגישות הרבה שיש לקשרים הביטחוניים בין ישראל לבין ירדן.
What do you think about the secret visit of the head of the Shin Bet and the head of Israeli military intelligence to Jordan at this time? What do you think it indicates?
نعم، أعتقد أنه صدر في البداية تطمينات من النظام السوري الجديد.
Yes, I believe that initially there were reassurances from the new Syrian regime regarding its relations with the Arab world, particularly with Jordan and others. We know that Jordan has strategic ties with the United States, so it will not allow any Syrian party or new regime to pose a threat to its security. Meanwhile, Israel is trying to exploit the contradictions in the region and instill fear among different parties to bring them closer together, often at a cost. Currently, Jordan is expected to pay a new price to the Syrian regime, or based on the control of these armed groups. But this price will not go to Syria. Instead, it will likely be paid to Israel, which may offer certain protection, support, or control, establishing an Israeli sphere of influence. What is Jordan's stance now? Jordan claims it wants a unified Syria, but if asked whether it would accept an Israeli influence separating Jordan from Syria, would it be willing to take that step? The issue is that various Arab and Islamic factions, such as the Saudi Emirati axis and the Turkish Qatari Muslim Brotherhood axis, sometimes clash and sometimes reconcile. But both sides agree that Israel is a significant player in their dynamics.
يتفقان على أن إسرائيل حل وسط بينهم.
The Israeli spokesperson mentioned that the visit aims to provide Israeli assistance to Jordanian security forces to help them secure the borders. What do you think this indicates?
نعم، هي مسألة التخويف مما يحدث في سوريا.
There's a concern about the fear surrounding the situation in Syria, suggesting that Jordan must always rely on Israel for protection, as if Israel has become the security guarantor between Arab groups and Arab nations. This dynamic allows Israel to take advantage of any missteps or errors made by the Arab countries, positioning itself prominently in the midst of the chaos and establishing a foothold in both Jordan and the new regime in Syria.
ولد النظام الجديد في سوريا.
In light of the repeated calls from ministers in Netanyahu's administration, particularly from Smotrich, to annex the occupied West Bank, enemy media revealed a message sent by the elected U.S. President Donald Trump to Israeli officials in which he rejected the idea of annexation at this stage.
טראמפ מעביר בתקופה האחרונה לאור ההצהרות של פוליטיקאים בקואליציה את המסר הבא: אני לא מעוניין בסיפוח כרגע. זה המסר שטראמפ אומר בשיחות סגורות בתקופה האחרונה. שמענו את בצלאל סמוטריץ' ופוליטיקאים נוספים מתוך הקואליציה אומרים השנה הבאה היא שנת הסיפוח, וכאמור טראמפ זורק את זה לפחות כרגע מהמדרגות ואומר להם סיפוח ממש לא על הפרק. אבל טראמפ לא היחיד בסיפור הזה, נגיד כך. גם בכירים רפובליקנים בשיחות שלהם עם גורמים ישראלים אומרים אומרים להם את הדברים הבאים: סיפוח כרגע רק יזיק למעמדכם הבינלאומי, ובנוסף לכך אנחנו רוצים את הנורמליזציה עם סעודיה, לפעול נגד איראן. סיפוח כרגע זה ממש לא המהלך הנכון.
הם לא אומרים לא בכלל, אלא לא כרגע.
לא כרגע, ולכן צריך להוסיף את אותה כוכבית מפורסמת בכל מה שקשור לטראמפ. אז שוב, טראמפ כרגע אומר, סיפוח כרגע ממש לא על הפרק, זה לא הדבר הראשון או לא הדבר השני שאני הולך לנסות ולעשות כרגע, יש עוד דברים הרבה יותר חשובים.
Currently, it is just not the case. Therefore, we need to include this important note regarding Trump, who states that annexation is not on the table and that it is neither his first nor second priority at the moment, as there are more pressing matters he intends to address.
أهم ما يعني إسرائيل في هذه المرحلة هي الضفة الغربية.
What matters most to Israel at this stage is the West Bank, especially when we talk about Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, who are residents of West Bank settlements. One lives in the north while the other resides in the south. This highlights a key aspect of understanding Trump's often unpredictable foreign policy. Trump has been vocal about the need for Israel to expand, and this expansion began in Syria. The prevailing thought was that a ceasefire in Gaza could be rewarded with American recognition of the occupied West Bank or the annexation of parts of it to Israel. However, there are two critical issues that cannot be overlooked. The first concerns Saudi Arabia, and the second pertains to Iran. Regarding Saudi Arabia, they have launched a project aimed at establishing a Palestinian state. This initiative resembles the Oslo Accords and is unlikely to lead a fully sovereign Palestinian state, but it provides Saudi Arabia with justification in the Arab and Islamic world to proceed with normalization. The second issue involves preparations by the US and Israel for future actions against the Islamic Republic of Iran. While we are not suggesting a military conflict, a significant pressure is expected from the new administration, aiming to impose the toughest sanctions possible on Iran, which may extend to other options as well.
وربما تتوسع إلى خيارات أخرى.
The ongoing crisis within the Israeli entity revolves around the recruitment of the Haredim, which significantly impacts the Israeli society and has repercussions on both political and military fronts.
חוק הגיוס עוד לא מונח על שולחן הכנסת, ובש"ס מחריפים את הטונים ומעוררים סערה גדולה.
זה הצורך חצר, גם מישהו בטלת.
ביום חמישי חשפנו כאן ב-i24 News לראשונה אמירה טריה ומקוממת של הרב יצחק יוסף נגד גיוס לצה"ל. הרב, חבר מועצת החכמים של המפלגה ומהמובילים והקולניים שבה, אמר במפגש עם תלמידים:
אתם מקליטים אותי? תחליטו. כן, הנה מה כזה, הנה רואים? האחים שבען, למדו בישיבת פרת הספר, היו בחורי ישיבות כולם. אחור הצבא, בעצם כאילו, כולם יהיו חילונית, כולם. אחר כך עשו בתשובה, אבל כולם יהיו חילונית.
רק בשבוע שעבר קרא הרב שכיהן עד חודש יולי השנה כרב הראשי הספרדי לישראל לזרוק את צו הגיוס שמגיע בימים אלו לאוכלוסייה החרדית אל האסלה.
אם יגיע צו גיוס, לקרוא את זה. יש לכם אסלה בבית, אז אלה באתם בכיסא נכון? תראו את זה, שימו את זה בצד, תורידו את המים. לא דבר, לא להתחשב, לא תפחדו.
ש"ס אם כך מחריפה את הטון ומשמיעה אמירות הקוראות להשתמטות הלכה למעשה. חלק מהבחורים החרדים כבר קיבלו צו המורה להם לבוא אל הבקו"ם, וההוראה הזאת תגרום להם לסרב לכך.
What direction will the crisis of conscripting the Haredim take, and how will it affect the relationship between the administration and both the Haredim and the religious students who refuse conscription?
هنالك أزمة كبيرة حتى داخل بالمناسبة حتى داخل الحرديم.
There's indeed a significant crisis even within the Haredi community, which is divided between the Eastern Sephardim and the Western Ashkenazim. The Sephardim believe, as stated by their chief rabbi, that the vast majority of those drafted are from the poorer Sephardic population. This suggests that even within the Haredi society, there are divisions based on ethnicity and background. These contradictions persist, and the law in question seems to be a crucial factor in the continuation of this administration. The Haredim society associate this law with a series of reform laws, arguing that it cannot be passed without addressing the issue of conscription. They are, of course, calling for an exemption from military service. However, there is no consensus within the administration on this matter. Figures like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich insist that they should be subject to conscription. Just a few days ago, Ben-Gvir took his son to the draft as a way to provoke the Haredim. Certain laws will not be brought to a vote in the Knesset because the Haredim linked these laws to the exemption from conscription.
هذه القوانين بإعفاء التجنيد.
كريم، كيف ستؤثر هذه؟
This crisis could significantly impact the occupying army, which is already known to be facing personnel shortages due to the aggressive wars it has waged in Gaza, Lebanon, and now in Syria. The consequences could be far-reaching.
هنالك أكثر من منطقة متفجرة بالنسبة للإسرائيلي.
There are several volatile regions for Israel, which means a large military presence and significant recruitment efforts are necessary. This is the first point. Secondly, the reserves have been exhausted over the past 14 months. They cannot continue in reserve duty as they are also facing fatigue from their commitments. The reserves need to contribute to the economy as well. Now, looking ahead to the post-war period, a strong economy is essential to cover the budget, which is the largest in the history of the Israeli regime. The third issue is that even the regular army is struggling. There is a significant shortage of manpower. Netanyahu is seeking a recruitment law that aligns with the army's needs. This means the military requires a specific number of recruits, and they're trying to provide as many as possible. However, there is still no agreement on opening recruitment to regular citizens or the settlers. Currently, within the governing coalition, we have three parties involved. Setting aside the Israeli opposition, the Likud party is trying to find a balanced point, while the religious Zionism party is pushing harder, feeling the pressure to maximize recruitment efforts while also protecting the Haredim. The Haredim, on the other hand, have yet to agree on a suitable law to address this issue.
والحراديم الذي يرفض حتى هذه اللحظة إيجاد قانون مناسب لمعالجة هذه المسألة.
المتابعة لشأن الإسرائيلي.
Mr. Saleh Abu Azzah, thank you so much for joining us in this episode of Israel Watch. Dear viewers, see you tomorrow. Take care until then.
بأمان الله.